Hope you guys are doing well this week. It's been kind of busy around our house, but all is well, and I'm just glad to be here with you. We're going to continue our study today in the book of Isaiah. Today we're going to be in Isaiah 40, and for those of you who are familiar with the book of Isaiah, you're probably excited because Isaiah 40 has got lots of encouragement. And moving forward, Isaiah from here on out to the end of the book has lots of encouragement. Just to kind of remind you where we are in our journey through Isaiah, starting in chapter 40. So, chapters 40 through 66, what we find is kind of a change of direction. You know, Isaiah has spent the first 39 chapters really revealing God's judgment and how God judges and why God judges. And remember, at the very beginning, we talked about Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, kind of being a miniature, a microcosm of the whole scripture. And so, what Isaiah does, kind of in that flow, this is where Isaiah 40 is where we kind of turn the corner, and God reveals through Isaiah, begins to reveal his redemptive plan for Israel and his redemptive plan for man. So Isaiah 40 through 66 takes us through those reminders and kind of that journey of redemption that God has planned through his word for all of us through his word. So that's where we're kind of, so you'll notice a little bit of a change of tone in Isaiah's writing, starting with the lesson today. Our title for the lesson is God Renews. I love that. God renews. Anybody feeling in need of renewal? Yeah, probably a lot of us are weary and tired and worn out and really need, can I just say, a little spiritual spa day, a little spiritual renewal, a little reminder from God that he's in control and he is taking care of all of us. And that's what Isaiah is going to remind us of today. God provides strength for those who trust him. So for all of us who are feeling weak, needing some strength today, I think you're really going to enjoy this lesson in Isaiah. Now we're actually going to jump into the middle of Isaiah 40. We're going to start in Isaiah 18. But I kind of want to give you a little bit of background to where we are jumping in. Chapters 40 and 41 kind of give a little bit of a do-over for the nation of Israel, the people of God, because you remember that they're not being obedient, they're being rebellious, and so the purpose of God's judgment is to bring them back to himself. And starting in 40 and 41 particularly, we see that the penalty for the sins of man has been paid and they have a chance to start anew. And we know that that is the story of the gospel. And I just think that's a great reminder for us. Our sins as Christ followers have been paid for. We don't owe for our sins. And that's kind of an opportunity for, well, the Bible calls it rebirth, to be born again so that we kind of get a fresh start and a do-over. Chapter 40 explains that the exile the Israelites and Judeans experienced was in fact a testimony to God's ability to accomplish what he said he would do. So all this time, 1 through 39, Isaiah is prophesying God's judgment, and God does bring his judgment, but he never leaves anybody in judgment. He always gives that opportunity for redemption. So that's kind of where we are as we start into our lesson in verse 18. And let me make sure. And another reminder, I just want to make sure I followed everything I wanted to say. The redemption that God has is not just for the nation of Israel, but God's redemption is for all nations. So that's a great reminder, because you remember we're talking about a specific prophecy, a specific prophet for a specific time for a specific people. So we have to be really careful when we interpret that, because we are not Israel. Isaiah is not prophesying directly to us, but God has put this in his word so that he can teach us about his nature and his character, who he is, how he works, and that his redemption really does go beyond the nation of Israel. So let's pick up in verse 18, and remember, keep in the back of your mind that this is a story of God's renewing and his giving strength to the weak, giving strength to those who trust him. So starting in verse 18, here's what Isaiah says: "To whom then will you liken God, or what likeness will you compare with him? As for the idol, a craftsman casts it. A goldsmith plates it with gold, and a silversmith fashions chains of silver. He who is too impoverished for such an offering selects a tree that does not rot. He seeks out for himself a skillful craftsman to prepare an idol that will not totter." Okay, so what Isaiah is doing is contrasting who God is and who the idols of the nations are. It's that idea of the contrast between man being created in God's image and man creating gods in his own image. So do you see, Isaiah is really kind of being a little sarcastic here, if I could just say it that way. It's like, how can the created create a creator? Did you hear that? How can the created, us, man, create, mold a creator, a God, not the God? So what Isaiah is really trying to communicate here is that God is a living God. God is the creator. God made us. We don't fashion gods out of things that God created. God created us. God created the gold. God created the silver. And he's saying even for the guy that's poor and can't afford gold or silver to make his God out of, he's going to go find wood, a tree that doesn't rot. He's going to go find wood, and he wants to fashion his God out of that. Those gods they're inanimate. They're lifeless. They can do nothing. They are less powerful than even the person who fashioned them. So Isaiah is saying, look, you can trust in God's renewal of your strength, because God's a living God. We didn't create him. He created us. So, we're not making gods in our image. God made us in his image. So God is a living being. There's power in the life that God has. So he's not fashioned out of silver or gold or wood. Man did not create God. God exists on his own. He has always existed. We can't even get our head around the idea of something that exists that was never created, that always just existed. Well, that is who God is. So Isaiah is reminding the people, look, God is a living God. He has the power to renew your strength because he is living. And then starting in verse 21, Isaiah reminds the people that God is a sovereign creator. Okay, let's back up. God is a living God. There is nothing that you can do or create. There's nothing that can fill you in the same way that the God who created you can. Now, I don't know that any of us really are crafting anything out of gold or silver or wood and, setting it up and worshiping it in our homes as an idol and trusting it for any kind of power. But sometimes I think we look to other things to take care of us. And, it might be a person, it might be a bank account. I don't know what that might be, but ultimately God is a living God, and the same God who cared for the nation of Israel, his chosen people, that same God cares for you and for me. So keep your focus on the fact that God is a living God. And here is Here we're going to learn of kind of two characteristics of that living God. And the first one is that he is the sovereign creator. And here's what it says starting in verse 21. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he, God, who sits above the vault of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. God created it all. The vault of the earth, the heavens, the inhabitants are like grasshoppers. He, God, it is who reduces rulers to nothing. So you don't have to look to stronger nations to have an alliance with in order to be successful, because it is he, God, who reduces rulers to nothing, who makes the judges of the earth meaningless. Scarcely have they been planted, scarcely have they been sown, scarcely has their stock taken root in the earth, but he merely blows on them and they wither. In other words, this is a great contrast. No matter how powerful you may think they are, or they may appear to be, or they may think they are, this says, Isaiah says, God merely blows on them and they wither. I'm thinking of the book of Revelation when we see Jesus coming back at the end of the tribulation to defeat all this massive, hundreds of millions of people who have come together for this massive battle. And Jesus comes back with us, the resurrected church. We come back with him, and he defeats all of these hundreds of millions of warriors, of his enemies, simply with the sword in his mouth. In other words, we don't have to lift a weapon, because it is simply Jesus, the word coming out of his mouth, that defeats hundreds of millions of the earth's most powerful warriors. So, no matter how strong some ruler or some person or some country may look, God just has to blow on them and they wither. And the storm carries them away like stubble. So our sovereign creator is all powerful. He goes on to say, to whom then will you liken me that I should be his equal, says the Holy One. In other words, Isaiah is saying, okay, God says, find somebody who is my equal. To whom will you liken me that I should be his equal? That's rhetorical. There is no one. Did you hear that? There is no one. Satan, because your brains are going, but Satan is so powerful. Satan and Jesus, or Satan and God, are not equals. One is good and one is evil. Satan is a created being. God created Satan as Lucifer originally. Lucifer got prideful, rebelled, and took some of the additional created beings that God had created with him in this rebellion against God. But don't think of God and Satan as opposites. God is sovereign over Satan. You see that back in the book of Job. You see that Satan does nothing that God does not allow him to do. So there is no one who is equal to God. Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these stars. The one who leads forth their host by number. He calls them all by name. God put the stars in the sky. He named them all. And y'all, there's like, I don't even know, billions of stars. We don't even know how big the universe is. Scientists think they know, but God knows, because God is bigger than all of that. And you know what? Sometimes we need to be reminded how big God is, and we forget. And I like that he uses the stars as an example, because sometimes I just need to go outside and look up at night. I need to see the stars and know that my God is so big that not only did he put each one of them in place, but he named them. He created them. He leads forth their host by number. So God is still in control of the stars, and he calls them all by name. Because of the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one of them is missing. Out of the billions and billions and billions of stars, God keeps track of them. And they're just the stars. They're not even us. And he created us in his image. So as big and as overwhelming as we may perceive the universe to be, God put all those stars up there. He put them in place. He named them, and nothing happens to any of those stars that God is not sovereign over. So this God that we trust, this God that renews, this God that gives us strength, not only is he alive, but he is the sovereign creator. Every single thing that is, he made it. And everything that is, he has control. You know, I just made a little note here. Well, let me go on, and I'll get back to my note. Starting in verse 27, another characteristic that we see about God is that he is a tireless source. He is your source. You know, we used to sing that song, he is my all in all. He is everything. He told Paul, when Paul wanted him to take away the thorn in his flesh, God told Paul, he said, you know what, Paul, I'm not going to take it out, but I tell you what, my grace is sufficient for you to walk with this thorn still being a part of your life. God is our tireless source. He doesn't have to have a nap. He doesn't have to sit down and rest. He doesn't have to have a timeout and say, you know what, I'm frustrated with you right now, so I'll be back after 30 minutes of alone time. No, God is a tireless source, and we see this in verses 27 through 31. Here's what he says: Why do you say, O Jacob, and assert, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and the justice due me escapes the notice of my God. Now he refers to Jacob and Israel here, and what he's saying is God's people, all of my people. Why would you say my way is hidden and the justice due me escapes the notice of my God? In other words, God doesn't really know what's going on. They're suffering and they're struggling, and God, I don't know, he's out somewhere. He's not paying attention. This is a little picture of doubt. The people are doubting that God really is a tireless source. And verse 28, Isaiah says, do you not know? Have you not heard? Now we heard that again up in 21, so he's repeating it in 28. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, does not become weary or tired. Now, just so we know exactly who he's talking about, he says the everlasting God. He calls him everlasting, so he never ends. He didn't have a beginning. He doesn't have an ending. The everlasting God. He never ends. The Lord, Yahweh, the one true God, the creator of the ends of the earth. In other words, God is not just a creator. Isaiah is reminding the people, look, God created the beginning and God knows the end of the earth. So he doesn't become weary or tired. He is without weariness. He never wears down. He never needs rest or renewal. Not only does he never become weary or tired, but his understanding is unscrutable. You don't ever have to wonder if God understands. Have you ever been trying to talk to somebody and explain something that you're upset about or a problem, and they're not really understanding exactly what you're trying to communicate to them, and you have to keep re-explaining it in different ways to try to help them better understand, and you feel frustrated because they're not getting it, they're not hearing you, they're not listening, whatever it is. Isaiah is saying God's understanding is inscrutable. He doesn't ever misunderstand. He, like Uber, understands everything even better than we know how much he understands. So not only does he not become weary or tired, his understanding is inscrutable. It's unquestionable. He understands everything. And then here's what he does. Here's your these three verses. Memorize them this week. If you haven't already, a lot of you probably already have, but if you haven't, memorize them. Verse 29. He gives strength to the weary, and to him who lacks might, he increases power. Though youths grow weary and tired, and vigorous young men stumble badly, yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary. I love so many words in these last few verses. God gives strength to you when you are weary. He doesn't get weary, but we do. And he has an unlimited supply of strength when we become weary. And when we lack might, when we feel weak, he increases our power. Some of you may be walking through some really tough times right now, and you may feel weak. You may feel like you can't take another step. But you know what? With God, he's going to increase your power. He's going to give you what you need to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Though youths grow weary and tired, and he uses youths and he uses vigorous young men. These are pictures of the epitome of strength. Our youngest is not living at home. He's at college. And there are a number of times when we've needed to do something that requires strength, and we've really missed having him around because we miss his strength. We miss because he's young and he just is, I'm surprised at how much he can just lift and carry like it's no big deal. And, his dad and I together, have to go to the chiropractor after we do whatever he does all by himself. So this picture of young men being vigorous and youths just having stamina and strength, he's saying even in the strongest and most vital, vigorous part of your life, you can grow weary and tired and you can stumble badly. So it is a strength that isn't something that is inborn in us. But when we wait, some of your translations may say trust or hope. That word is used interchangeably. Really, wait is the best translation of that word. Yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. In other words, that idea of wait does have trust built into it. In the original Hebrew, it is that idea of not trying to muster your own strength, but waiting on the strength of the one who has infinite strength. But you have to trust that he has it and is able to impart it to you. So that waiting is not really a passive waiting. It's a very active waiting. It's that idea of expectancy, expecting that God is going to act. Those who wait for the Lord, here's what they get. They're going to gain new strength. New strength. It doesn't even say renewed. It says new strength. It is fresh strength that you're going to gain. You're going to mount up with wings like eagles. Now, I think the reason he uses eagles instead of just birds, I want you to think about how birds fly. If you think of a sparrow or a mockingbird or a blue jay, a cardinal, or any of those kind of birds, they fly by flapping their wings, right? Flap, 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 flap. They're just flapping their wings, flapping their wings, flapping their wings. So they flap their wings to fly. Eagles soar. In other words, an eagle is up high and he is able to analyze the wind patterns and he will just loft off of that pinnacle and spread his wings and soar. And I think other birds of prey fly like that too. But the eagle is the illustration we have here. So that the eagle really doesn't exert the energy. So I think the picture here is that we can mount up with wings like eagles. In other words, he doesn't give us the strength to flap our wings like a sparrow and just flap, 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 flap. What he does is he gives us strength that allows us to just spread our wings and soar. We just kind of float on those wind patterns, and there's just so much peace in that kind of strength. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not grow weary, not become weary. I like that Isaiah reminds us that when we get tired, God doesn't just sit us down and say, okay, here, rest in this little chair and just sit. What Isaiah says is, you know what? It is in the midst of whatever it is you're going through. He doesn't say you're going to stop running and rest. He says God is going to give you the strength that you need to keep running and not get tired, to keep walking and not become weary. So that is the idea of that renewal, that infusion of strength that happens while we continue to walk, while we continue to run, while we continue to move forward in the way that God has intended for us to. So whatever it is that God has called you to do, or whatever circumstance you're in today, God has the strength for you to continue to walk, for you to continue to run wherever you are. So what a great reminder that God renews and he provides the strength that we need when we trust him. Because remember that wait for the Lord in 31, that implies that you're trusting. You're waiting expectantly for God, but you are trusting in him, believing that he is going to give you what you need. Now, the little thing that I skipped over that when we talked about God being a tireless source, when the people back in 27 are saying that my way is hidden from the Lord, that God really doesn't see what's going on with me, God may not really care what's going on with me, I see in that God's people may have felt alone or abandoned. And I just felt impressed that maybe some of us may be there as well, feeling alone or abandoned by God. But I think what Isaiah reminds them in 28 when he says, do you not know, have you not heard, the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, does not become weary or tired. His understanding is inscrutable. I think what he's reminding them is, look, you may feel abandoned by God, but those are often the times that God is the closest. So for us, maybe, I think I was supposed to say that for somebody, I don't know who, but if you're feeling like you're alone or that you're abandoned by God, or God is not there, God is not listening, be encouraged by Isaiah's words when he says, do you not know? Have you not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, doesn't become tired or weary, and his understanding is inscrutable. He gives strength to the weary, and to him who lacks might, he increases power. So trust in that God, the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. That is the God who doesn't become tired or weary. He understands completely, and what he's going to give you is strength when you're weary and power when you feel weak. So a great reminder. And for this week, your homework is memorize Isaiah 40, 29 through 31, because you need to be able to whisper those sometimes when life gets really, really tough, and be reminded that God is the source of your strength as you're walking through, as you're running, whatever it is God has you doing. He is giving you all of the strength that you need. Okay, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and I look forward to meeting with you again next week. So, love you guys.